So I think it's very fascinating and involving space and changing, I guess, every day in terms of new business model, new players coming in, product, customer expectation, technology. So I think it's a very, very fast evolving space, and therefore it's important for us to understand what is happening. Obviously, with so much growth, with so much changing, there's always this risk that it might do something which is not correct for the consumers. It might do something which is not correct for the ecosystem. So with it's a proliferation of so many things happening, and so it's a very fascinating space. So there are many ways to look at it, but if I have to look at, I will say on the demand side, it's a very strong demand which is happening. There are more and more customers who are trying to explore how they can take credit on the digital lending. So if I have to start with the demand, it's also changing rapidly, right? More and more customers, not just very young but mature customers, are coming to digital credit to solve for it. You are seeing already, it's not any longer a tier 1 or tier 2 phenomena. There are customers coming from tier 3, tier 4, customers who are coming not just for their convenience or the short-term loans, but a lot of other asset classes which are moving, including two-wheelers. I think 80% is digital journey, credit card, CD, a lot of different assets class are moving to digital lending, and which is essentially changing, making, I don't know any asset class which will in few years time would remain sort of physical in that sense. So that is a very good change which is happening, and including, we feel that secure lending could perhaps become digital. On the supply side, obviously hundreds of players perhaps in the market, very, very traditional NBFCs we are seeing completely pivoting to digital lending. So you will see much more competitive marketplace, not just Fintech lending, which of course has a lot of advantage because they started early and they are making, they have much more insight about the digital lending. But if you look at traditional NBFCs, technology is commoditized, anybody can start digital lending. So how that pans out, I think, is something which will be very interesting to see. And also, banks more and more getting into space. Partly, I think it's very clear that this is how the customer is moving. Nobody wants to go to branches any longer, and therefore, it's important to give them those kind of journeys. So that is something again which is very interesting. And I also feel the way demand is into sort of expectation from the money, right? It's changing. Like in my generation, we never thought taking credit for something less than home or car. But now people are okay to take credit for anything, So fundamentally, there is a change in their attitude to credit. And as we talk about whatever $1 trillion economy, I think credit is going to be biggest enabler in achieving that, because unless that kind of money is available, people have this attitude to consume. Domestic demand is going to be biggest driver for India as an economy when we talk about expanding it further. So I think those would be very critical factors, and this is where we fit that digital lending is at a space where it will connect these dots to make us more inclusive economy. So this is how I will look at digital lending ecosystem.
Okay, so I want to make a distinction between need for regulation and need for industry body. They are actually quite distinct issues altogether. As far as need for regulation is concerned, as Sugandh mentioned, it has been a fast evolving space. What it has led to is new business models coming up, new set of companies coming up. There's a new way of catering to the customer being almost every day you see a new evolution happening here. And to manage this, I think one will have to revisit a set of rules on regulation just so that it leads to a fair and honest play. And in that context, not only the regulator for lending, which is RBI, but many other government agencies who have been the guardian of fair and honest play, if you may, they have to revisit if some of the things which have applicable in the past have to be made amended or made changes in that. So there is a need for a regulation for sure, because this is like a new way of doing a business, and hence one will have to revisit if the rules apply equally there or not. But as far as the industry body is concerned, I think when we all came together and created this, we started this with a very strong objective of ensuring, one, we can have a dialogue with not only regulator but other government entities as well, and I'll elaborate more about it. Second, the centricity of starting this was to make customer as the core. By creating industry body, are we able to take care of customer concerns to the best possible form? And last but definitely not the least is how do we drive responsible lending. So those were the three objectives, and let me just elaborate very quickly on each of them. So first and foremost, on the dialogue part, what has happened if you go 3.5 years back? There were a set of events, perhaps driven by part Chinese companies, part companies which were spurious, who were following spurious practices, that has led to some kind of suspicion among the government bodies, among the regulator, among many other players in the ecosystem. And it was absolutely critical for somebody to come together and be able to communicate, be able to drive a dialogue with the regulator in the rightful manner. If you recall that time, it has also led to some unprecedented wave of anomalies, which basically led to people just having a disbelief as far as digital lending is concerned. And before, it was all getting bucketed into one way of people thinking about fintech. I think our objective was to come together, create an industry body which can go and do a far more mature discussion with the regulator and some of the government bodies. On the customer concern, see, at the end of the day, the core of it is to ensure that there is a very high degree of responsibility that digital lenders are showing when they are interacting with the customer. We have developed an ethical code of conduct that is much more stringent, I would say, than whatever regulator may have ever suggested. This is only to ensure that we are serving the customer in the rightful manner, and there are no shortcuts being taken. There are no practices which perhaps is not acceptable. Those are becoming the norm of the day. So that was the other big objective of starting this. And as you know, in the past, there are many things which have come, which have taken newspaper, this thing, which may be linked to collection, which may be linked to, some customer grievances, etc., etc. And if you are trying to solve for this, what was happening is there are good players, there are not so good players. And to create a set of uniformity among everybody to follow those practices, we thought everybody coming under one umbrella, an industry body, which also gives voice to all the players who are participant to this, will go a long way in meeting some of these objectives. So that's the reason why we thought the industry body has to come in, and we invested time, energy, effort to build this.
So I think just adding on to what Ranvir was saying, I think other thing which we are very conscious that we represent the diversity and the complexity in all its manner of speaking, right? So we don't want to be just representing a voice of certain class of institution, maybe large or certain product types. We do want to ensure that fintech lending in its different shades is something which comes for the discussion with RBI, so that it doesn't become representation of narrow voice. So if we want to become a self-regulatory organization, it's important that we represent large, small, different products, different customer focus segment, and that is something which we have been very careful in face, and this is where we distinguish ourselves with other industry bodies, where we have been very careful that all our members have equal voice in the decision making process. When we are going to the regulator, we ensure that they all whatever we are representing does not hurt any of the interest, but equally we would not shy away from biting a member if we feel that particular member is not adhering to code of conduct or something. So the membership comes with a lot of responsibilities. Of course, you have privileged position to giving your point of view to the regulator, but it also comes with the responsibility that your conduct should be high. So as I always see that, how do you really make all this believable to regulator? How do you really make them trust you to give more responsibility to grow, expand and scale up? It's only by doing things which are trustworthy, honest, dealing with the customer. So I think as a community we do want to pass on this message, and again it's fast evolving. You cannot stop players coming to be part of the fraternity. They will keep coming, and this is where we pitch in as a face to ensure that whoever is coming, intentionally or unintentionally, they should not do something which could spoil the image of the industry. And this is where there's a peer group which is available, which will support each other, but there has to be intent to ensure that we do not do something which can harm the customer. So I think that would be my pitch as a organization which is also trying to be self-regulatory organization for the industry. So as an industry, there would be more and more players coming, and it's very natural for the scale of the industry. So we cannot stop different players coming in. What we have to ensure that whoever is coming comes with a clear understanding in terms of what their expectation is with respect to customer protection, and have so FAZE as a body will help all these companies to follow those standards, which ensure that customer protection is a minimum that which all the companies follow.
I think there are many ways we do that, and when I say this, I say it both with experience and something that we are blessed to do together. First and foremost, whenever there is a event, and the event could be a regulatory announcement or something which is mentionable or significant enough for all of us to congregate, we actually come together. As Sugandh pointed out, we are not a homogeneous group. It's a very, very heterogeneous group, which is also a respect to the diversity of different business models everybody is following. And we basically all come together then to say what should be our point of view, if that requires a point of view, what would be the most mature, responsible way of putting this point of view to the entity we'll be interacting with, which could be, as I mentioned, RBI, or it could be Ministry of Electronics and Telecommunication, or it could be any other government body. So that's one set of interaction that we do. Second set of interaction, which is more ongoing, which is around there is ethical code that we have designed. We almost ensure that as members we are committed to not only adhering to it, but also being a role model as far as the industry is concerned. And that goes a long way in enhancing the customer centricity. So that's the second way. In addition to that, there are, I think, one of the other benefit that we have is because we are a set of players who are literally the key players as far as lending market is concerned. There's a fair degree of data collection, insights in terms of saying what is the size of the business we are going after, how important it is becoming. One thing which has always been a pet project for RBI is to what extent it is driving inclusion and product innovation. That product innovation which will further add credit penetration in the society. So we work on topics like this. Just to give you one more instance, for example, a few months back we all came together and we said if we have to mitigate frauds happening in the system, is there a way we can work with a rating agency and create a model which can allow us to measure and basically monitor the fraud instances, or for that matter use the data for underwriting in a much better way. So it's a combination of basically how do we communicate better with the regulator, and how do we further push the agenda for being very responsible, quote unquote, and having a very high degree of customer centricity around us. We also feel that these are just the ingredients for us to go towards becoming an SRO. So as again saying, becoming an SRO requires following things. We thought always that there are a set of things that we have to do where we come as the body which is seen as the default body to play the role of a self-regulatory organization. So these are a set of interactions which usually we do in our when we interact with this.
I'll begin with the code of conduct. As Ranvir said, we have really make it much stringent, much more evolved in terms of setting the disclosure standards, setting data privacy standard, marketing standard, recovery standard. So that is something which is already there, and we are making it more stringent, looking at what is happening in the market. So that's the first step, which clearly lays out what is expected from the lenders and what customer can also expect from the lenders. So that is the, I would say, fountainhead of all our work. Second bit, I would say, is the monitoring, because it's important. You can have nicest of code of conduct, but nobody is monitoring, then it's just a piece of paper. So you can have best of the code of conduct, but unless somebody is monitoring it and enforcing it, it's just a piece of paper. So what we are trying to do is, through using data, using members' own strength, we are trying to ensure that if at all there are complaints which are coming, they are addressed adequately, and we can support our members to ensure that they fully comply with code of conduct, not just in words but in deeds. A third bit of work which I think is very important, and again a long-term thing, is a customer education, because customers should understand their responsibility but also their rights. So if customer knows that I'm supposed to get a KFS, then they would demand for it, and lenders would be obliged to do it. So while lenders take the responsibility and regulation mandates, it's also important for customer to demand those things. So I think customer education is important aspect. Again, we really leverage the strength of our members to ensure that customer education content that we create is disseminated to customers, and it's an ongoing thing, right? For example, fraud is something which is a very, very big problem that we are seeing accelerating beyond our imagination. So it's important that customer understand who are the legit player, who are not legit player. They understand that importance of cyber security. They understand they should be careful about sharing data and so on. So these are some of the very important things which from the customer perspective, and we're also learning, right? It's not something which can be done in a window, right? You always have to strive for ensuring that customer remains protected. I don't like the word protection because it seems that lenders are vultures looking at customer, but it's important that customers are still very new to credit market. There are many new customer, thin file customer who don't have a lot of experience with credit, and therefore it's important that we continue to handhold them, give them right kind of information so that they can use the credit in the right way, because credit can be double-edged sword. So at ecosystem level, a lot of efforts are required that credit is used in a very prudent way, in the right way, and customer has choice, but they also have control in terms of their credit decisions.
Oh, absolutely. I think first of all, I wouldn't say that this is only an isolated effort done by us. A lot of it is driven both by us and along with FACE. And as much as we have driven our things, we have communicated, we have also learned a lot from there. But in terms of specific initiatives, I think first and foremost, just making customers aware what they are getting in, being extremely transparent about the pricing, being extremely transparent about the disclosure that are required is the starting point of what we do. There have been instances in the past where people get trapped into taking loan more than what they can otherwise pay. Not only that, people as much, there is fraud cases which have increased like anything. So there are instances which happen where somebody takes money on somebody else's behalf, and that does create a big issue for the customer because their CIBIL gets impacted and things like that. So I think the first thing is, beyond transparency and disclosure, is to ensure that the customer is fully aware. And there are a whole host of fraud checks, fraud measures that we have put in place, which actually drives some of those things which can just stem it right at the time of underwriting. In addition to that, as an organization, we have had a very strong focus on just ensuring that all the customer related issues, call it grievances, call it service issues, call it experience issues, has to be adhered to immediately. We have some internal ethos, as you are very well aware of saying anything which comes from customer within 48 hours, we have to resolve that. currently we are running at some 96% of those resolutions happening in 48 hours. We want to achieve much higher. But that's one big effort around managing it. One of the big gray areas as far as customer is concerned is what are the collection practices one is following. I mean, we as a company, we have taken a call of keeping all our collection in-house. We don't work with any agencies. We are responsible and our employees are responsible for ensuring that the code of conduct which RBI has defined and whatever we have, set of practices we have committed along with FACE are fully adhered to. There's an entire audit team of close to around 100 odd people who just ensure, just building on the point Sugandh made on monitoring and audit, which has to be driven if we have to achieve those outcomes. Now, one level, one would also say that these are all reactive measures, so they are trying to reduce the negative instances. Beyond the negative instances, I think one of the big focus area we as an organization have had is to give a very different level of customer experience. I know customer experience is a vague term and vaguely employed more often than not, but for us it is a sense of delight that we are able to create. We are able to drive credit for the purposes for which the customer may be seeking money, and at the same time create an experience which allows the customer to be linked to us. It doesn't mean that they come back and take another credit, another loan. No, that's not the objective we drive. It's just what we are aiming for more often than not is a degree of engagement, because the degree of engagement can allow us to offer better product, better services as they pursue the relationship with us. So those are some of the measures that we have taken to ensure we are able to manage both the positive, negative, middle, whatever side of the experience with the customer.
Yeah, so industry is at inflection point. You will see a lot of maturing happening. Along with the scale and growth, you will see much larger focus on some of the things which are becoming very important, including compliances, customer protection, cyber security, technology deployment. So these things are becoming more and more critical. So we would like, world-class fintech companies coming from fintech lending companies. We already have world-class fintech companies, but fintech lending companies which can set best benchmark in terms of how the lending should be, what the customer experience should be, and including profitability coming in, companies getting more transparency listed. There's a long wish list that we would look for. So as a face, I think we will be very close to what the market needs, solving common problems as an industry, coming together, rather than waiting for the regulator to come in and say this is what should happen. As an industry, we should be much ahead of the regulator to say we will self-regulate, we will set the rules, we will strive for nothing short of world class in terms of cyber security, data privacy, and give customer that confidence that more people come to fintech lending and meet their credit needs to that. So we see a very important role as a face where we can provide that platform for fintech lending companies to come together. They can share their experience. Everybody can help each other to grow and be a world-class fintech lending companies.
I think, as Sugandh pointed out, we are at a turn and cusp, almost at an inflection point. But at the same time, I think it is an ecosystem which is at its infancy. There's a big thing waiting to happen. The big thing is waiting to happen in terms of the customers who will be targeted. Any average number on credit penetration will tell us that perhaps the opportunity is 10 times bigger than what we are playing on right now. It is almost given that there are some global fintech lending companies which will come out of India. And it becomes absolutely critical at this stage for us to keep our head over our shoulder, continue to focus on the theme of customer centricity, the compliances, some of the points which Sugandh mentioned, particularly around cyber security, data privacy, which perhaps are in the past has always been seen as Western market things. But now I think we are at a stage where perhaps India will be setting standard for some of those things. And while the industry players are trying to achieve that, I think FACE as an industry body has to be at the center of all this. there is a sense of insecurity among many other stakeholders who are involved. When I say stakeholders, there are banks, there are larger NBFCs, incumbent, there are regulators, government agencies, etc., etc. And I think it's very important that we, as fintech lenders coming together, being able to allay the concerns, allay the fear, still at the same time have a partnership with the different constituencies which exist in the market and are able to work together while targeting this opportunity will become extremely critical. Self-regulation is one very critical pivotal point within that, but beyond that, just ensuring that we are widening the base, we are including almost any and every responsible lender in the system as part of this ecosystem, and continue to hold ourselves to high standards that we should run with when we are going after an opportunity like this. And that would call for a great collaboration while working with others.